Hello, and welcome to the Better Than Bitter podcast. Today we have Gabrielle Hartley. Gabrielle has written the book Better Apart, as well as The Secret to Getting Along and Why It's Easier Than You Think. Gabrielle's book was so important to me personally. It really did get me through the beginning stages of my divorce. She is an online mediator, but she's also a former to the New York State Supreme Court Judge Jeffrey Sunshine, and she has been part of the American Bar Association and mediation for a very long time. She is a committee member and a co-chair and is currently taking on a leadership position at the American Bar Associates. Oh my goodness, she has so many titles that I can't even say them right. She is one of the best online divorce mediators. I'm so excited for you to hear her speak today. One of the things that I do want to remind you is the incredible books that she has authored. Better Apart, A Radically Positive Way to Separate, and The Secret to Getting Along and Why It's Easier. She has such a great TED Talk, so if you do have the opportunity, that will be in the show notes. And I hope all of you listen to that because it really does describe a lot of what she talks about in her communication book. So again, check it out if you want to learn how to get along better. Don't we all in divorce? And she is so focused, just like I am, in making this world a better place and making divorce easier. And she really is focused on this less acrimonious divorce process for both you and your children. She is a graduate of the Brooklyn Law School and Cornell University. Welcome, Gabrielle.
My gosh, so nice to be here with you today, Tania. Thank you so much for that nice, warm introduction. I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. Well, we have so many things to talk about today, but today I want to start with your book, Better Apart, because like I said, this was the first book that I found when I was searching for kind of amicable divorce solutions. And it just touched me in such a profound way, not only just the words and the education, but also just the mindfulness that you teach throughout that book as well. That just really is so important. And I can't stress that to people who are starting their process enough. So can you tell me why, what was the impetus for Better Apart? And, how did you come to, deciding that this was the book you were going to write?
Yeah. So Tania, I've been a divorce lawyer for about 30 years, but I never thought I was going to do divorce law at all. I grew up with parents who were divorced. They actually had a very good divorce. They were almost like braggy about how great it was. I will tell you, it's not like it was perfect. Like there was plenty of drama. There were plenty of, families, blended family situations, which were not always pleasant. But when I went and for Judge Sunshine in the divorce court in New York City, I saw how unbelievably acrimonious the process is, it's not really necessarily the fault of the lawyers or of the judge or of the process, but the three things working together are used as though that's the fallback. Whereas from my point of view, from my worldview, that should be really where you go as a last resort if you've got somebody who's absolutely unable to communicate in any way, shape, or form in a forward-moving manner. And so I worked in the court and I thought, oh my gosh, people need to know that there's a better way. And I looked in the bookstores, actually, very old-fashioned, right? And I saw that there were a lot of books written at the time by lawyers, like, how to represent yourself, and then by people who'd been divorced, who were like coaches or yoga teachers, et cetera, who had a good divorce and were trying to tell people that they could get divorced well. And I thought, gosh, I really want to tell this story as someone who both grew up with divorced parents and who worked in the trenches helping to resolve almost 1,000 high conflict divorces, and as someone who practiced yoga at the time. I was practicing yoga every day. So I really wanted to bring in mindfulness and I don't mean in a woo-woo yoga, overly yoga way. I just mean in a self-empowerment, like you can do this and it's all about you, right? So it's almost like the concept of being selfish right now when you're going through your divorce is actually, it's selfless to be selfish, if that makes sense. It's a circle. So we could unpack that, but essentially it's like I felt like I can't reach the world. I'm in my office, and even though now, yes, I do all my mediations online, so theoretically, yes, I'm reaching the world, but I'm only reaching that one person at a time. And I thought I'd write this book and it would have broader reach and I could make people feel a little bit better during this horrible time and let them know there's a better way.
Yeah, I think that we have the same mission. I created Better Than Bitter for that as well, because again, we can only touch one individual at a time, whether as an attorney or a mediator or a coach. But yet, like, how do we take this idea that divorce doesn't have to be a battleground, that there is a better way? And I love the fact that you too utilize a lot of mindfulness, because I talk a lot in my work about space and creating space and being able to get out of that fight, flight, or freeze mentality that is being overrun by our primitive brain, and how we can get into our prefrontal cortex, how we can create space so we can think more logically, is where we can have more rational thinking. I talk about the fact that, we have to move ourselves through this emotional divorce before we step into the trenches in our legal divorce. So we don't end up spending millions of dollars on having our lawyer be our therapist, right? Or just, representing yourself from a place of emotion. When we're emotional, we're not making good decisions. So talk about the highlights of like Better Apart. And like, if you were to, tell somebody currently who is really just either in the trenches and it's not going the way that they want it to go, or they're at the beginning stages and they really can create a framework, what would you suggest to them to say, like, first read my book, but secondly, these are just things to think about in terms of the acceptance about being apart, I think is so important. So where does that come into play?
So I'm so glad you just said that last, the acceptance about being divorced. Another impetus for writing the book was to a little bit lift the shame and stigma around divorce. We live in the shadows. You're outside, you're in the grocery store. Everybody else looks so happy pulling things off the shelves. And you feel like, oh my gosh, my life is such a mess. I made all these poor mistakes. I stayed too long, or whatever your particular narrative is. I really think that just remind yourself that you're a perfectly good person, whether you were the quote unquote wrongdoer or if you stayed with the wrongdoer or whatever your particular narrative is. A step back is usually the best way forward. When you're getting divorced or you're in any kind of traumatic state, think of it as like your thinking brain is co-opted by your emotional brain and you literally cannot make good decisions. Right? So you really have to slow down your thinking, give yourself the space to grieve, give yourself grace. I talk about the 5 essential elements of a better apart divorce. And just to touch briefly on what they are: peace, patience, respect, clarity, and forgiveness. Clarity is really what you want. Once you have clarity, you can make better decisions. If you're right now working with a lawyer or a mediator or by yourselves and trying to figure things out, if you're asking yourself, if you're finding that you're perseverating on your position, the what that you want, ask yourself why you want what you want. Because when you can understand your motivation or your need rather than your want or your more surface desire, you're going to find that it's easier to feel satisfied at the other side of that rainbow. There's no pot of gold there, but there is a sense of peace and satisfaction. So getting really clear with yourself about where do you want to go from here? And there's sort of something exciting about that, Tania, right? Wouldn't you say, like, once you break free from being kind of stuck in the narrative of what was and all the loss and, pain, you can start to feel and see a little light. And so, like, when I talk about forgiveness, I don't mean forgive somebody who did something terrible to you. I mean to radically love yourself and accept the situation and know that that person, no matter how garbagey they might have treated you or left you feeling, I happen to be of the mindset of people do the best they can in the moment where they are. Their best might be your worst, but maybe, you saw them through the lens of your abilities, not their abilities or something like that, right? So forgiveness is all about acceptance. If I were rewriting Better Apart now, I'd probably call it acceptance, because what I've learned over the last 6 years of talking to many thousands of women and men. Nobody likes forgiveness.
So I actually, when I talk about the 7 phases of grief, I bundle kind of forgiveness and acceptance together in the sense that it's not forgiveness of a certain person's actions. It is forgiving yourself for the ability to relieve the burden of bitterness. I have the capacity to relieve myself from the bitterness that I feel right now. I'm forgiving to move forward. So I forgive to accept.
That's right.
So it's forgiving to accept because I don't want to carry that burden of bitterness forward in my post-divorce life, right? So because that's where, like, you divorce somebody and you hold on to the resentment and the bitterness and the anger, and then you might as well just be married.
Right. More happier, not angrier, right? So, and then, peace. I'm not talking about, peace signs and unicorns and rainbows. I'm just talking about feeling a state of okay. So, there's ways to achieve peace, very quickly, noticing lots of neutral behavior on the part of the person who's doing incredibly aggravating things can be really helpful. It can go a long way. Respect is about self-respect. And your feelings of self-respect, depending where you are in your divorce process, can be pretty darn low. And so what I advise you to do, or what I would do if I were in a situation where I'm feeling a low sense of self-respect, is to do things that make you feel good, that you're good at. Be with people who lift you up. If you have a best friend who is just constantly insulting your ex or telling you why you shouldn't have stayed or second guessing you, put that relationship on a shelf and be around people who allow you to grow and to become the next better version of yourself in this life, right? And so, and it all takes patience. And I write a lot about patience because I need to learn patience. I'm a highly impatient person by nature. And, you have to be patient with yourself, with your ex, with your kids, with the lawyers, with the therapist, with the judge, with the system. I mean, we could, with the teachers, with the school system, we could go on and on and on. And so really, by building yourself up, working with a coach, if possible, working with a therapist and a coach and a mediator and a lawyer. I mean, getting as much of a team as you have the capacity to get. Sometimes you can't do it all at once because it's too expensive, but that's okay too. You can do things in tandem and you can really make this an opportunity, make your divorce an opportunity to launch the next better stage of your life.
I know. So that's what I talk about too. So many of my clients come to me with this sense of failure, right? So I failed. And what I coach them on is that divorce isn't about failure. It's an opportunity for personal growth and self-discovery. And as soon as you can switch your mindset into that abundance mindset and allow for yourself to think about what the possibilities of your life could be. And again, just like you said, having clarity around what is the bigger picture that you're striving for, not just the tangible assets, but the bigger vision of what the life that you want post-divorce is. As soon as you get clarity around that, and that you can look at this as a personal growth opportunity. And we do a lot of work on self-discovery, self-awareness, learning who your authentic self is. So much of us, we're a persona pre-marriage and we get married and our persona changes, not for the good or for the bad, but it just changes. But it's about reestablishing your passions, the things that you love, the things that maybe you didn't get to experience when you were married for whatever reason, and just regenerating those and bringing those back to life so you can feel good about your future and who you want to be. It is a new chapter. And I got so much of that from your book. It's really just, how do you create that, that next chapter? The world is your oyster. I know that's such a cliche, but it's true.
I know, but there's a reason. Some trite cliche things are just true, right?
Yeah.
Back to your core self. Like, who are you? I was talking to a guy who was divorced recently, and he talked about he'd been with his wife since he was 19 years old, and he went back to his house and he's like, "All right, it's just us, and who the heck are we? I'm
Yeah.
used to get right. Like there'd been a whole family and then the family wasn't there anymore in the same sense of the word. And it's like, it's about reestablishing yourself. And, the thing about it is most people getting divorced are doing it in somewhat of a silo. You may have one or two confidants, but just know that it's something you will get through. You really will. I mean, if you haven't experienced the death of a loved one, it's when you're going through that, it feels like you're never going to get over that, but you do most of the time, depending, and divorce is better than that.
Let's talk a little bit. You just said something that's really interesting. So, in my course, I talk about communication plans, and we talk about how to communicate externally to your friends, your family, your children. But from your perspective, there's so much, I guess, shame still, that stigma of being divorced, or the stigma that people who are getting divorced feel, that they believe that other people are looking at them in a different way. What are your thoughts on getting past that feeling or that stigma, and giving people some level of empowerment to not feel embarrassed about where they are in their lives, and how to approach that from an external communication perspective?
Yeah. So from an external communication perspective, other than one or two confidants, I would really encourage your world to not speak poorly about your ex. They can say, I hope you're okay. They can say things that are like supportive. But the fact of the matter is your ex is still a part of your past narrative. And I don't really think it does anybody any good to feel like a whole section of their life was a lie, that anything, it's not a this or that. It's not a binary. Your experience may have had some great parts too. Like to think that maybe you stayed there for some reasons beyond, I was financially trapped. I had to stay with the kids. My family would disown me, whatever. Like, I think that it's really important to draw lines, especially if you have children, because it just is communicating that your children are half bad if they're half the offspring of your ex, right? Think about it. And your ex is not your child's ex. And I can remember overhearing things as a child from my parents' friends who are perfectly nice, saying like unkind thing about the other parent, and like whatever. I wasn't like upset by it. I more thought that, they were, I just, I didn't have like the highest thoughts about them. I would just communicate less, because also you're going to move through it more than other people will, especially if you have an ongoing relationship because you're co-parenting. And then if people see you as being positive and being highly functional, they are going to be less inclined to keep on repeating that negative narrative, which is not going to help you over time. Now, I said all that, but I'm also going to say, if you have friends and you're really not comfortable being in the same environment with your ex for a period of years, you might say, hey, right now, I'm really not comfortable being in the same place. It's totally cool if you just invite them, or if we alternate, or I know like situations where the two parties decide to alternate on their own when they know mutual friends are going to invite both of them. But it doesn't mean you have to demean each other.
Yeah. And you are my third guest that gave the exact example about not throwing the other spouse under the bus for the exact reason, especially in front of the children. And, I don't believe it should ever happen, but especially in front of the children, because you used the exact language as two other guests.
Really?
Our children are 50% of each parent. So when you begin to speak poorly about the other parent, that child recognizes that they are 50% that person, and that they are then bad.
I mean, that I actually, maybe this is TMI. This is not because I'm a lawyer or a mediator, but I, as a young woman, remember thinking noticing like a lot of my friends' parents had intact families, and they were just a little less self-critical, a little less critical of their parents. Like it's very slight, but I was very aware of this concept that it's really bad. And my parents actually didn't demean each other much at all. So
Mine didn't.
yeah, but you could imagine that if it does happen, it's really not good. And I'm just going to say, if my parents could do it, I don't know Tanya's parents, but I'm going to say if Tanya's parents could do it, you can do it too. And it's not because, in my situation, it's not because my parents, either of them were perfect. My dad had like a new wife kind of character every 4 years or so. But they were all good. I still know all of them. And my father passed away a few years ago, and many of them showed up to his funeral, and it was all fine.
Yeah, it's funny that you referenced that, because I do believe that, when we, and with my kids, the whole idea that I'm divorced and my parents were divorced, and that my ex's parents were divorced. And so my daughter especially is like, oh my gosh, does that mean I'm going to get divorced? And, I wanted to share with her like your story, like, hey, listen, I came from divorced family and I'm still married. So anyway, marriage is hard. And if you work at your relationship, it doesn't matter if your parents were divorced or not. Just relationships are hard in general. 50% of people getting married get divorced, right? So at the end of the day, no child should feel doom and gloom because they come from divorced families. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually think, this is also like a weird thing to say, but I think that if you parents handle your divorce well, your kids are going to develop skills that they never would otherwise have gotten. In other words, having to be a little more organized with their things, having to learn how to, share a room with a step sibling, having to do like all the things there. Your child is going to become more flexible, more resilient, more understanding, but it takes a lot of work. Unless you are both sort of like very Zen people. For most people, it takes a lot of pauses, shelving, space, as I think Tania likes to call it. Space is a good thing. Take a time out. We all need timeouts.
Yeah.
And it is not going to ruin your children for you to get divorced. For you to be fighting constantly, whether you're married or divorced, is not good.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing is people are like, oh, well, your parents were amicable. Neither one of them must have had an affair.
Yes. Right. I was subtly saying my father had like constant girlfriends all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it takes again, when you have that bitterness because that happened, that is where the drama forms. It's the bitterness and the resentment and the anger. So you have to process your grief, obviously, feel your feels, understanding what your thoughts are about that are creating those feelings. And that's the model by which we coach. We coach around cognitive restructuring. So it's not our life circumstances that are causing us to feel, it's how we think about our life circumstances or the facts in our life that make us feel. And the way that we feel, that makes us act, react, and behave in certain ways. Those feelings are what are making us act, react, and behave. But it comes from our thinking. It comes from the stories and beliefs we're telling ourselves. So if your spouse has had an affair, okay, but what are you making that mean?
I have to say something. I now know why you love Better Apart so much, because you are it was probably very affirming. I talk so much about re-narrating that inner narrative, because what you think things mean is what they mean to you. And, I had a situation where someone canceled on a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, well, and in my mind, I made all these valid reasons why they might have done it, which made total sense and had nothing to do with the friend. And my friend's take was like, oh, they must not really care about our relationship. I'm like, what are you talking about?
You know what? I do this coaching to myself every single day, right? We all have busy lives, and, people are doing the best they can as humans. And especially if you have children, you've got hectic jobs or whatever. What are you making it mean if somebody is not living up to your manual? The first chapter in my course is about the manual that we have for others. And if you believe that everyone's going to work according to your manual, you're always going to show up disappointed, resentful, and angry, right? And that is your mindset, right? Because nobody's coming in no one's showing up the way you want them to. But that's a mindset issue. That's a thought issue. That's a belief system issue that you can't change others, right? You can't control others. The only thing that you can control is how you react to them. And it's so important. Hi, everyone. It's Tania here. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Better Than Bitter podcast. I really appreciate everybody supporting our mission to help change the divorce dialogue. So if you are interested in subscribing, that would be great. The more people that subscribe, the better we will be able to produce content that's meaningful to you. And in appreciation for people who subscribe, we have lots of different special offers at Better Than Bitter. One of them is that you get an opportunity to participate in a free group support trial. We have a support group membership plus, which means that you not only get weekly support groups, but in addition to that, you get access to a resource library of articles, webinars, workshops, and so much more. By subscribing, we want to give you the benefit of jumping into one of our support groups and trying it out. One of the other benefits is that you can participate in a one-to-one free consultation with me. So if you are going through divorce, if you're at the beginning stages, maybe you're in the thick of it, or maybe you're post-divorce and just wondering how to get back into life, start dating, building healthier relationships, all of those are things that we can talk about in our one-to-one consultation. So again, go ahead, subscribe to our channel and participate in one of our free offers. And I look forward to engaging with each and every one of you so you can be better than bitter. So I do want to just touch on the next book because I want everybody to hear about the yes method, because so many, like I said, I do workshops on how to communicate to get what you want in divorce. And what you say about your yes method is so aligned with everything that we talk about at Better Than Bitter. I feel like we could have written a book together. And tell us or tell our audience here about, the idea around communication and how to get through mediation utilizing this idea around the yes.
Okay, so the yes method is really a way to break down how to get to the core of what it is that you want. And yes is just an acronym for your role. Like, what are you doing? And that's really asking you to stop and ask yourself, what is the core behavior that I'm displaying right now that's getting in the way of my figuring out my E, right? And the E is the emotion, it's the need, it's the motivation. This is very theoretical. I'll make it more practical in a second. It's the story, why we want what we want, right? And then the S is the activating agent, shelving the heated conversation caused by your behavior to get to the E, right? So you may, in a divorce, like both people really want the house. Okay. So the story is, I need the house. And what happens is people start either catastrophizing things, I'll never get another house. The kids will have to leave the school district, minimizing, oh, don't worry, you'll find something. Or burying their head in the sand. Like, I want to buy the house. Well, there's no way to pay for the house. Right. Or somebody else comes in, steamrollers. There's all these different things that we do that cause relationships and arguments to froth up, to escalate, right? But if we do the S, which is to shelve the heated conversation before it gets out of hand, we can take that pause, right? That's all shelving means, is pausing, step back and say, why am I minimizing what they want rather than thinking about what I need? Because that centerpiece, the E, the what you need, which links back in Better Apart to the clarity piece. Understanding your core motivation will bring you to the solution that actually tends not to contradict what the other person's core need is. That's how mediation works. It's actually crazy. I don't tell people to do these things. I kind of just do it with them. But that is really what's happening. So let's say both people want the house, and maybe, one person wants it because they think if they don't have it, the kids will never visit them. And the other person wants it because they think if they don't have it, they'll never be able to, afford another house. But I've seen this happen time and time again. We say, okay, let's do a little experiment. Let's rent an apartment in the summer. Let's say a family, you can rent a 3-month apartment or something. Let's see what happens. Let the kids start getting on a visitation schedule at that apartment, right? And they do that, and they say, then that parent starts to have heightened confidence that the kids are actually going to come and visit. Right? And then maybe the parent who doesn't think they're going to be able to afford the house they didn't realize how much they're going to get in support, or they didn't realize, oh, with this new free time, they can get another job or whatever. Suddenly, nobody wants the house, right? That nobody liked the house in the first place, but they came in blazing guns that they needed the house, right? And so we unpacked it. But because what they were doing was one person is getting all heated up and the other person is saying, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, which just gets the first person more heated up and it gets into a cycle. And then if you go to court, well, good. That just cost you each $60,000, right? Plus more fights and more fights and more fights, rather than noticing what's going on and getting behind, the why of the what. So I don't know if I explained that very clearly. Listen to my TED Talk. It's much more clear.
I listened to it and I think everybody should listen to it. Everybody Google Gabrielle Hartley. Actually, the link will be in the show notes of the
getting along. If you do, yeah.
It's so good. It's so good.
But it's like, I give an example there of somebody who didn't want their kid to have overnights at their father's house. And it turned out, and she was really arguing a lot about, because the kid's hair wasn't being done well for school. And when I in real life, I said, is that what this is really about? And she said, yes. And then I was like, really? Or is it that you miss your daughter? And when I said that, then she started to cry and then she let him have the overnights. When I started to do this kind of law, I was only 30 when I was working in the courthouse. And so, when you're 30 years old, you're pretty young and you're just, maybe if you're listening right now and you're 30 and you don't feel young, you are young. You just don't realize that you're young. I noticed that when I would reflect how people felt or what I thought they were feeling, they would go from angry to almost like teary. Not crying, but teary. It'd be like the mask was broken. And when I broke through the mask, all of the arguing just melted away.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. It's like, and then you realize, oh, well, if that works on other people, that can also work on me. I'm really hard on myself. And I say, what am I really fighting about? What am I really upset about? And an important thing from my second book, The Secret to Getting Along, is also, I think I call it hashtag relationship goals or something like that. It's like, do you care about this relationship that much? Because sometimes walking away is the best thing to do. That's maybe not the case when you have kids, but I just think that's a good life lesson. Some relationships are not meant to continue forever, and that's okay.
And and as much as, what reflectively looking back at my marriage, I was like, we are so much better apart. We are better communicators. We are better friends. We respect each other more. We have more patience. We are co-parenting better as an apart couple than we were before. And it just goes back to all of your guidelines that you talk about, the peace and the respect, the clarity. And it's just so amazing how, again, if you can separate yourself from we have to be together because it's the commitment we made to maybe we just are going to be better, not in a, marital partnership, because it is about redoing the partnership. Because if you do have kids, you have to redo, right? You don't want to take over the bad partnership you had here and move it into the post-divorce partnership. You want to rejigger and you want to be able to reframe. And if you can take all the principles that you said, how to do this better apart better, and you can take that into a more productive, communicative, collaborative, co-parenting relationship forward, that is where the power comes. Like you said, that's the sweet spot. And you have to believe you can, okay? Because again, I feel like the term narcissistic person is so overused right now because everybody whose marriage didn't work out is married to a narcissist. And it's just we all have narcissistic behaviors. Every person in the entire world has some level of narcissism because it's a sense of self at the end of the day, but it is how you nurture that or feed it or rebel against it. And that's where the turmoil comes in. And again, just separating and creating that space between you and then rethinking how to have a more productive relationship versus the blame back, which is never good.
Yeah, the labeling and the anger that may get you through the darkest days. And that's okay if you need it then. But that angry naming, calling your ex a narcissist, clinically, very few people are actually narcissists. People are selfish, people are self-centered, especially, when I used to work for the judge, we'd often do something called, we'd have to get a forensic, which is like a clinical evaluation of the person. And, I would see them, I'd put my hands over and I'd say, let me guess, obsessive compulsive narcissism, because everyone getting divorced is a little obsessive compulsive and acts a little narcissistic, because it is a trauma. It really is a trauma. I even feel like it's important. I talk about the positive divorce movement and things being positive and better and all that, but I am not sugarcoating and glazing over the fact that this is hard. You have a road ahead. You can't go around. It's like that bear hunt story. You can't go around. You can't go over. You have to go through it. I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about, but there's a children going on a bear hunt, and I remember to this day, and I'm so grateful that my mother did this. I asked her why she was getting divorced and what she said, and she was not the bad one, right? Like she was, I'm sure, not perfect, but not like my dad. And sorry, Dad, who's not alive. I shouldn't say things like that. But anyway, be that as it may, she said to me when I said, why are you getting divorced? She said, Dad and I have grown-up problems. We love each other, but we cannot stay married. You are a child. Don't worry about why we are getting divorced. You need to be a child. And I mean, what a gift.
Yeah.
I'm going to call her and thank her after we hang up.
My parents said something similar. They just said, listen, we still love each other, but we've just decided that we're not in love with each other. So we're just not going to stay married, but we both love you so much. And we are so committed to being as loving parents as we can to you.
My parents also told me and my brother, you're not running circles around us. They were very united. But Tania, we're really lucky.
I know.
Anyone listening right now, if your family models are not like our families, that's normal, that's okay, and you can do it. You can do it.
Well, I know that we need to start wrapping up, and I have one other question. And I ask all of my guests. I wrote a blog. It's called The 20-Year Marriage Contract with the Option to Renew. Of course, it doesn't need to be 20 years. It could be 15 years. But it's this idea that it's really easy to get married, but it's super hard to get divorced. So if you were to think about a 15 or 20-year marriage contract when you got married, but it had the option to renew, what would you believe the trajectory of marriage to be? And would there be a shift if you had to talk about all of these kind of life decisions, staying at home, deciding not to work, one person working, having some level of early contract again, and how you treat each other, knowing that you have the option to just be like, I'm done.
Yeah. So I think that if that were the norm, I think marriage would be very different. I think everybody would work because it'd be scary not to work from a financial point of view. I think, there's a lot of statistics that show when people live together and they're not married, they're more likely to break up. I think relationships would end more easily. I think there's a reason marriage is structured the way it is. Well, obviously there's a reason we had shorter life expectancies, et cetera, when it was first created. But I do think that it would really change the nature of marriage significantly.
So thank you again, Gabrielle, for being a guest today. We really, really appreciate it. And I hope that everybody does read your books because, again, it really, really did help me in my process. And I hope it'll help many people moving forward.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Tania.
So at the end of every podcast, I always like to sum it up with my 3 top tips based on what I have gotten from the podcast and the person I'm interviewing. Gabrielle had so many amazing things that she said today. But in summary, the 3 top things that I got out of today's episode was number 1 is that she talks about the 5 different ways that you can approach your being better apart. And the one that really stood out to me on top of, just being peaceful and respectful is really the one about clarity, because it's so important when you are getting divorced to have clarity, not just on what you want, but have intent around the why, meaning understanding why you want what you want, because you need to be able to step back from the minutia and the little bits and pieces about the asset division or the parenting plan, but take a step up, look at it from a drone's view and thinking about the bigger picture and really understanding why is it that I want what I want? Because it's important to take the emotion out of the equation. So the second thing that I got from her talk was about the yes method. And the three parts of the yes method in order to communicate to get what you want is really about, one, understanding the part that you are playing and understanding that in order to communicate properly, pointing blame back at the other person is only going to give them power over your emotions. So being able to understand your role in being able to move this divorce forward and the amicability portion of that really just comes back to controlling what you can control, and that is yourself. The next part is really the emotion. So where is the emotion coming from? Understanding that primitive brain, understanding that fight, flight, or freeze mentality, understanding that you need to give yourself space. And the S is being able to shelf it. So the E and the S go together, meaning that in order for the E to be managed, your emotions to be managed, you need to be able to shelf conversations. You need to be able to press pause. And the last thing that I really want to point out in Gabrielle's discussion is similar to where I have ended with other interviewees, meaning that we need to keep our children at top of mind. That when you throw the other spouse under the bus, when you allow for other people to speak poorly of them, that especially in front of the children, that the children really do recognize that they're 50% of each one of those spouses. So you need to make sure that they believe that each the 50% of them is good. And if you are constantly surrounding yourself with negativity, with people that are speaking so poorly of your soon-to-be spouse or soon-to-be ex, that you are only going to create more negativity in your life. So make sure that you are saying positive about the good things that you see in that individual and not so focused on all of the bad. And one of the most amazing things with having such incredible guests is that you get the chance to work with them. And I want to be able to allow for you all to explore working with Gabrielle. So if you go to GabrielleHartley.com, you would be able to see all the different ways that you can hire her as your mediator. Now, if you are in New York or in Massachusetts, she can draft a complete agreement. So you can work with her as a mediator and do that through Zoom, and she can draft the entire mediation divorce agreement for you. If you are outside of those two states, she will draft a memorandum of understanding. So all of the key elements that need to be in your divorce agreement by which you would have an attorney draft for you. And I can't say enough about working with somebody who has had a 99% success rate of keeping people out of the courtroom. So definitely be sure to reach out to Gabrielle. So thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Better Than Bitter.